Okay, we're going to get started now. Hi, my name is Sally Young. I currently work on the Canvas team at Acquia, and this is...
Yeah, and hi, I'm Fabian Bircher. I work for Drupal. This session is hooks from magic names to PHP language feature. We just introduced ourselves. So, what you learn in this session is how to extend Drupal with code. So you know when you run Drupal, the index.php is where the request comes in, and then Drupal does magic and calls your code. As a developer, you want to interact with Drupal, but how does Drupal know about it? And there is much more depth that we can go into in this 20 minutes, so we will show you a little bit how it works. This session was basically prompted by Dries giving a Q&A in the Dev Days in Leuven, when he mentioned that the coolest thing in Drupal core that nobody talks about is this thing called hooks as classes. The QR code leads you to the recording. But yeah, it's basically, he's like, oh, this thing landed and in Atlanta nobody talked about it, but it's really cool. And I was there and I was like, yeah, I agree, this is really cool, nobody talks about it. So, first, in PHP 8, there is a really cool new feature, and it's called attribute. And
Which minor version did it come in?
8.0. There's, in the different versions of PHP 8, more attributes have been added to PHP core. But with the attribute itself, you can create your own attributes. And the documentation about it says, the QR code again links to the documentation. PHP attributes provide structured machine-readable metadata for classes, methods, functions, parameters, properties, and constants. Attributes provide a declarative way to annotate code with metadata. Since Drupal 8, we were using annotations, and this is the language feature that completely replaces that. From PHP core, not all in 8.0, but in different versions of PHP 8, the ones that you're probably seeing most in the Drupal code base are sensitive parameter, which is a language feature that makes it so that the stack trace doesn't contain the thing that you annotate with that, or the thing that you put this attribute on, so the password, hashes, and stuff. Allow dynamic properties is so that PHP doesn't complain if a class has dynamic properties, because otherwise that's deprecated. And the return type will change is so that you can evolve like an interface or things that you inherit, but you want to change the return type because return types are more strict than it used to be. And an example for this being used in core is, of course, the password interface, where you don't want the password to be leaked into stack traces when things go wrong.
And why did we want to replace annotations?
Yeah. So, for people that were using Drupal 7, there were all these hooks, and a lot of these hooks became plugins. And plugins had annotations, and these annotations were in a comment. So it was structured, or like metadata that was in a comment. And then we had the annotation parser that would read the comment on a class and extract this data. But it was still like it was a comment. It was like functionally not meant to be executed, or not meant to be the thing. And since PHP 8 became the minimum required version for Drupal, all of the annotations are being converted. There's some, especially in tests, that are still annotations, but all of the plugins in Drupal core have been replaced, and since Drupal 10.2, it's encouraged for all plugins, and I think it will be it's already deprecated or will be deprecated, but in future versions Drupal will not have the annotation parser anymore, and it will only be attributes. An example is, this is a block plugin. removed a couple of things that are not relevant for this example. You can see the syntax. This maps directly to a class, the attribute class, the block attribute class, where this is basically just the constructor of this attribute class. And this way, the block plugin manager will know this is a block that you in your config module define. I mean, this is from core, but core modules behave the same way. Why we want to get rid of the way hooks have been traditionally implemented with procedural hooks is this magic names. So, you know, hook underscore whatever the hook is. And there is a potential for conflict. So if you have something admin menu, you don't know if the admin belongs to the module name or if it's the admin menu hook. And there's this ambiguity. You cannot do dependency injection. So the way we did this is we have the hook, and then in the hook we call a service, and we just pass the arguments from the hook to the service. But by default, it's not so easy to write tests. And also all of these live in the .module file, and they're loaded all the time. And we can have improvement if we don't do that like this. Then we were trying to do event subscribers and subscriber everything. There's a lot more boilerplate. Like the way event subscribers work is not a one-to-one match to how hooks worked. And so it was like a lot of people tried very hard to move all the hooks to event subscribers, and like that was before PHP 8 and the attributes, but it was difficult. Yeah, and what do we want from a hook? We want a class with dependency injection for easier testing. We want it to not be ambiguous. So we want as little boilerplate as possible, and with auto-wired services, for example, and a straightforward update from the old hooks to the new system. And we want to still have all the options that we had before with optional hooks and reordering and all these complicated things.
Cool. So just out of curiosity, how many of you were around for the upgrade path from 7 to 8? And then how many of you found it quite a mental shift to go from hooks to plugins? Like struggle? Yeah, not so many. Okay. Well, I struggled with it a bit, so yeah. So if you liked the hook system as a mental model, I think you'll like the way it's done now. So there's 3 ways that you can implement these. You can directly add it onto your class method. You can stick them at the top of the class, and you can attach it to a method of any name. So that's the second parameter. You can just call it whatever you want. Or if you want to have a class that exists solely for implementing that one hook, you can annotate it at the top and add an attribute at the top. And then it will always call the __ invoke function. So if you want it very encapsulated and make sure that no one ever uses it for anything else, that's the way. Which means we can do very cool things. So if you have has anyone ever had to write something like this where you have a generic function? So I always had to write things that integrated with like third-party services, and it'd be like user management. So you'd often implement 3 of the same things, and then you'd have loads of helper functions, and you'd just be like chucking more and more hooks. So you see this pattern really often. I have messed up the example, so those bottom 2 should actually be user role update and user role manipulation as well. But what we can do now is that we can add multiple hooks onto the same function, which is really cool, and it's much easier to pass in your head too. Which means we can also now do some cooler things that you couldn't do before. So Well, so before, if we wanted to change the order, you'd have to implement another hook, and it was kind of odd, and you'd often have to just like pop in there with a debugger and try and figure out what's going where. So we can set something to run first. Obviously, if you've got lots of things that are saying they're running first, it will then go by module name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can set it to run last. Then you can start getting more specific. So we can say we want our hook to run after the editor and the media module. So this is an actual example from core. Or we want it to run before this other module. You can then get even more specific and start reordering other modules. So let's say I'm fiddling with the entity pre-save and I've made a really evil module that steals all of your data if you're using field encrypt, and I'm going to trick you into installing it, and I want to steal everything in plain text before you save it and think that you're okay. Then I could insert myself before field encrypt gets there and steal your stuff. You can probably think of a better use for that, but you know.
Except in this case, you would then get the encrypted one.
Oh yeah.
Foiled again.
Oh. You can also remove hooks. So let's say Layout Builder provided like a really annoying help. It doesn't, but and it's, you know, popping up all over your stuff. But you don't want to disable the help module because everything else is really useful. You can just switch that one off. And I think you can put that in any class, right?
Yeah, you'd still have to put it in the same places where this
Yeah,
gets
it's got to go in similar places, but like obviously it's a bit of an odd one in that it doesn't attach to a specific class. Or you can ruin your site completely by removing random node access alter hooks and letting everyone have access to all your stuff. So use wisely. If you are supporting a site pre-Drupal 11, anyone still doing stuff like that? Or if you're a contrib module author and you still want to support versions before that, but you want to use the new stuff, you can use the legacy hook attribute. So if you implement your hook, mark it with legacy hook, and then implement it as you would a new hook that we've just shown you in your services, you'll auto wire it up. Drupal will know to not run the top stuff if you have an attribute at the bottom, so you can have like quite a nice transition without being like, well, if you're using Drupal before this, you've got to install version 2 of the module, and after this version 3. Some hooks are going to remain procedural and will do for the foreseeable future. It's likely that whatever replaces these won't be hooks, it'll be something else that no one's come up with yet. But
these are special anyway. Like they run before the these are special anyway. Like the install hooks, they run before the module is installed. Like
magic.
Weird.
Yeah, they happen in a weird phase in the Drupal site. So hopefully, you know, they're not things that are running like constantly on your site anyway. And then hooks implemented by themes as well still remain how you'd seen them before. You can also get a slight performance improvement, but you know, as this starts to trickle out to everywhere, hopefully it'll have a bigger impact. Once you've upgraded your module to using hooks everywhere, you can add this to your services YAML, and it will stop scanning for procedural hooks in your module on the requests, which is very cool. So when you test these things, before, when you were trying to test hooks, you'd have to have the container available, which means you've got to have a Drupal site in your test base, which takes ages to start and run. But now we can unit test them, which is a lot quicker. So for example, oh, it's so big. This is the node access hook in the node module in core, and we can see it's quite simple. It's checking if the user has permission to do some things and says yes or no. So that's quite an easy one to write a test for. It's quite sorry, I didn't realize this piece so big. So here you can actually see another attribute, data provider. This means that we can provide all of this data into our test. So the bit that you care about is just here. We've invoked our hook, we've passed the mock node that we've made and the account and the operation, and we get an actual result. So then we can just go through and assert that everything we thought is true, and it runs extremely quickly, which is great. That's it. If you are interested in learning more, you can scan that QR code. It will take you to the documentation. I'd also recommend looking through Drupal core to see what kind of attributes are around. As we were writing this, we discovered there were no tests in Drupal core that were unit tests for hooks. So VJ, she's here, you helped make the first one. So if you wanted to contribute some tests, that would be a really good one to start on. Did you have anything to add? No? That is it.
We have still some time for questions.
Yeah, we got like 2 minutes for questions. If there are any. Or are you all just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen? Cool. Yes.
So why do theme hooks don't work? Should we not use theme hooks? Should we use trick extensions, or are theme hooks special in some way?
No, the problem with themes is they're registered differently.
Okay.
So the registry for all of this, this works. Yeah, it's always so low.
You're too tall.
Yeah. I think there is a plan to also make it work for themes, but because of the way all of it, like themes are a little bit different than modules, so that the code works differently, so the whole loading and all of this is different, and
it's just a whole separate system.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of complexity as well, and so to get this done, it was like, okay, we make it work for modules, and then we make it work for themes.
Okay.
Yes.
The hook theme for a module, to declare templates,
Yes.
is it covered by this module?
Yes. Like if it's a module, it is. If it's a theme, it's not. So it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're like still kind of in the middle of, like, this is not the end of how Drupal will work. Like, it's a process.
Yeah. But I think everything has been converted that can be so far without more architectural changes, right?
Yeah, except for these, all the module hooks are converted. Also the ones that you do yourself.
But this is normally in the install.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway,
Exactly.
so everything that is on install
Yes.
stays the same.
Yes.
Everything that is on the module,
Exactly.
it's anyway.
Exactly.
I have a question regarding the reordering.
Mhm.
Like the example, it's just. So my question is like we should do it in the same class. Like so what is the preferred approach kind of deal? It's like we should have one class where we define the reordering and our hooks, or we should have just one class to define what we want to reorder and have one class just for our hook, or
I don't know if there's like a
Yeah,
preferred way. I think like so.
or it's still too new to.
Yeah, I don't want to like go on a limb and say you should do this or that, because the reason why this ordering system exists is because before there was a hook implements alter that you could.
You can change
alter
the order
and
of even
exactly.
other modules.
Exactly, and most of the time this was used to put your module last, or your module first.
Exactly.
And this use case is this. So this replaces the hook implements alter for most of the cases. But because it could do many more things in the past, there's edge cases that you could do before that you cannot do now. But they're so edge case that it's probably fine, and there's
and
ways.
It's probably we were doing something very wrong.
Exactly. You were probably
I
doing
understand.
something very exotic.
Very
So if I try to look back at previous project that we worked on, this would probably have covered all of them. Like, there might be edge cases.
And it's covered everything for core.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It covers everything for core, and in my experience, also for all the projects I worked on. And there's a couple of country modules that have weird things of doing, or weird ways of doing things. Yeah.
Any other question? Okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.